And we are live. Welcome to another episode of the New York Information Security Meetup Podcast. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Noah King from Horizon 3. Noah, thanks very much for joining me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, David.
Yeah, no problem. And listen, I'm super excited, and I want to first thank you for taking the time and getting out of your comfort zone. You know, people don't realize that, first of all, I was terrible the first, 50 times that I've done it. And it's not easy to have a completely unscripted conversation. So I do appreciate that. And I urge anybody who has never done this to get out of the comfort zone and do this. But let's jump into just to ease you into things. It's like, why don't we jump into your history? You're a senior software engineer, right? Mm-hmm. In one of the fastest growing security companies out there. from a startup perspective, but it was not always the case, right? You went to school for business. Why don't we start kind of like how you got to be a software engineer, and then we'll start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I originally went to college for business administration. I spent most of my life always doing sales. I thought I was always going to be a sales guy, and I worked for some typical sales companies, just selling software, selling to the technical people. And I always remember when I would go to those calls, or I would try to sell them monitoring for your SQL databases. I had no clue what a SQL database was. And my girlfriend at the time, she started going into a boot camp and learning development. She did it a lot in college, and she became very interested in the development piece. So I saw her go through that boot camp, have a lot of success. And I said, you know what, I want to explore that. I'll at least get better at my current job, and maybe I'll be able to sell a little bit more. But then as I got all these skills learning full stack development, so I learned HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node, JS, databases, all the inner workings of making a full stack app. I started to say, you know what, this is more interesting than sales. I don't want to have a quota every year that I might get fired if I don't hit my quota. So I started really investing full time into that. I went into a few kind of smaller companies to learn full stack development, and then eventually came over here to Horizon 3, where I became a front end engineer, and building a lot of the front end technology for Horizon 3. So it's been a wild ride of just like 5 years in the industry learning. I've also been teaching a lot of coding. So I've been an instructor for the UNC coding Bootcamp. And we probably had about almost 1,000 students that I've had go through the class that I've been a part of teaching them. And so I think that gave me a lot of, comfort with talking randomly and ranting about my feelings and my opinions on dev. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I got started. And then, of course, I'm now moving more into cybersecurity as well.
So if you don't mind, there's so much I would like to double click on and kind of zoom in. So I ask you a couple of questions. So first of all, I know a lot of people that end up in sales roles, and then, some of them, they want to go out and do something else, but they don't know where to start. And essentially they might not take the initiative, maybe because they're scared from the unknown, or maybe they don't want to make the commitment. What in particular do you find that specifically in your skill set and attributes that you found, coding so appealing? And again, it's one thing to see your girlfriend doing coding and say, well, this is, phenomenal, kudos to you. It's completely different matters to go ahead and actually do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So once I started getting into it and everything, there was plenty of times, especially once you get into your first scripting language, it was just so difficult. And it's frustrating. I started doing the work, and I started seeing how difficult it really is, and why people have many sleepless nights and, bashing their keyboards. I think the biggest thing, though, that I've started to learn in general is just having that persistent mindset. When I teach all the students and they come into the boot camp, they don't know nothing. We try to have a boot camp where no experience, just come and I'll show you everything. And that's kind of a hard thing for me to gauge. Every student is on a different level of technical skill, but the big takeaway is just be patient with it. It is a learning process. It's more of a marathon, not a sprint. And really learning a lot of cybersecurity lately and hacking has reinforced those mindsets on me too lately.
And speaking of mindset, programming is really all about mindset and be able to understand the fundamentals, right? So you mentioned scripting language, but then there's object-oriented languages. There are all kinds of different ways to code, right? Do you find that there, in particular, there was areas that were easier, or where was the kind of the switch where almost like the light switch went on and you went over the hump of the frustration and figure it out?
Yeah. I mean, I would really say a lot of it is, I started learning front end. I think a lot of people find front end or building a website, HTML, CSS, JavaScript as a good entry point. And I wasn't doing that great at it. For me, the switch was I knew that my company was about to lay off my team in sales because it was kind of a ragtag group of salespeople, not really the main focus for the company. So by knowing that they were going to probably lay us off in the coming months, that was motivation for one. And then I said, you know what? I don't have all the technical skills yet, but I have really good networking skills. I know how to sell myself because that's what they trained me to do. So I really leaned on a lot of my current skills of networking, how to interview, how to just be a very open and personable person. And that took me far. That got me my first dev job, and I walked out surprised that I had it. And now I said, now I really have to learn these things, because if I show up and I don't know nothing, then I'm in trouble. So I think really that was a big piece for me. But in general, it's just, set goals, working towards them in small incremental pieces, finding what works for you and what motivates you to move forward. The biggest things too, she's my wife now. She told me, I remember you were horrible at coding for a long time. I told all my students I was one of the worst developers in the class. And all of a sudden you just became amazing and it took off. And I think it's really also getting confident. It's okay to know. I don't know everything, but I can learn it. I can go find the info, and then I can become an expert. And teaching and talking to others about these topics is a great way to also just expand your skills. Because if you have to teach it to someone, you really need to understand it.
Yeah. And, again, listen to you speak. It's very different from the image, I guess the kind of the common knowledge or image of software developers being in kind of in a back room somewhere, with a can of Diet Coke and Cheetos or Doritos crumbs all over them, and they're being antisocial. You're smiling and laughing because that's kind of the typical stereotypical image, and it's completely not the case. Do you find that specifically the combination of skill set between the soft skills, which are really hard skills, and hard skills, which are really easy skill for you that you gain, do you find that combination was really helpful for you to propel your career at the beginning?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's the biggest thing that a lot of I try to teach my students as well. It's great that you might be doing awesome in the boot camp and getting A's on all the homeworks, but is your personality good? Are you easy to work with? Do I want to work with you? Do I want to have you on my team? And so a lot of times it's also talking about there are other aspects than just being technically sound. You can teach that to a lot of people. I know that when we hire people too, we look for people who have more of a mindset of, I will learn it. I want to learn it all. I don't know it, but I'm going to try. And I think really for me, personality and just your approach is such a big piece that people often overlook.
And you speak specifically about the incremental goal setting. I think that a lot of people have an issue with that in the sense that they know what the end goal is, to being X and be successful and doing, all the things that you want to do. But then they don't know how to, subdivide that into incremental goals. Mm-hmm. What was that like for you?
Yeah, I get a lot of feedback on that in general. I get a lot of responses of, how to take really big, lofty ideas or goals and achieve them. And for me, the biggest thing, for example, getting into cybersecurity, becoming a good hacker, a pro hacker, I want to be one of the best hackers there is out there. That doesn't happen overnight. So I have to say, what do I do to get there? And the same with coding. I have to spend time each day. I have to make small steps, small goals that I can work my way to. So for me, it might be today I'm going to try to do SQL injection, or I'm going to try to learn about Kerber roasting. And I try to also use the tech talks, for example, that I do as really a good motivator. I have 1 month, learn this topic. You better be an expert at the end of it and demo it live. That's great motivation. Like setting smaller deadlines and working towards that goal, I think, is a real big piece of it.
And you mentioned that you set up a time to be a speaker, and that's set in stone, and so you almost have no choice but go ahead and doing that. And then you have to get yourself to a certain level before you present. So is that an effective method of doing this?
It is a really effective method, and I know that not everybody has a tech talk where they can go do that, but I think the other approaches in general, you need to have some kind of level of passion for it too. And I always remember hearing that when I got into software development and tech, and I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. Like, sure, I want to get paid well. I want to have these skills. And it was hard to kind of get that passion always. But now I'm at the point where if I'm learning hacking or I'm learning a topic, I eat, sleep, and breathe these topics sometimes. It will be midnight and I'm like, I'm just going to watch one more YouTube video on somebody talking about this. I find really different ways to learn and to help propel myself. I think there's different levels of learning. I could take a really passive way and just sit on the couch with a beer, watch somebody else do hacking. That's a good way to learn and just see. I can also then pick up my computer, start doing some hacking. So there's different approaches that I try to take. Or if I'm driving in the car, maybe I put a podcast on, listen to something about that. So it's really just finding times where you can fit this material into your life in an enjoyable way as well.
Yeah, and we'll cover some of the kind of the learning aspect, how to best learn and how one size does not fit all. But you talk about specifically about passion. But what comes first? Is it passion or the fact that you are kind of struggle and then being successful to generate that, that passion? What comes first? Because a lot of people say, oh, it's easy for you to say, follow your passion, but I don't even know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. I don't think you have the passion at first. I've always told all my students in the bootcamp, when we get near the end, what do you want to do? There's so many different fields you can go into. You could be a database administrator, front-end dev, full stack. You could do sales engineering, QA. Like, what do you want to do? And a lot of times they don't know. And so my approach has been, I just got to try things. I got to try it all, see what I like, see if something naturally sticks. Then I'm like, okay, I seem to have a knack for this. Let me continue to pursue it. And in order to get to that level, to even know if you're going to be a specialist or you'd be good at it, you do have to struggle with it. And it is kind of a frustrating aspect. For me, getting into hacking at the beginning of the year, so many times reverse shells weren't working, different tools, errors, and it was so frustrating. I just wanted to throw it away at times. I'm glad I didn't. I stuck through it. I started seeing them work, and then they just become more and more advanced, and you start to figure out what you're interested in. But I think really the key is try it all, see what you like, and continue to, go down that path.
Yeah, I always recommend to new grads to join smaller companies where they can get exposed very quickly to different roles without a lot of red tape. Because if you join a large established company, they pigeonhole you into a specific role. So let me again pull the thread on this sweater of struggling. We live in a society where it's all about the hustle or whatever. But when you go onto social media, no one is really, show the struggle. Everything is rosy. It's like the Lego movie. Everything is wonderful. And I think also the education system is such that, minimize the struggle, right? They don't allow, they allow the student to self-learn, but everything is pretty much spoon-fed. And in your realm, your domain, a lot of it is self-learning, the struggle, trying to figure things out on your own. Do you find that again, from your experience, because you went through formal education, and then like, some sort of boot camp. But then I would suspect that a lot of the skill set that you currently have are self-taught, as you mentioned, by doing and struggling. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, in general, learning any kind of topic or any of these things and coming up with a career and a profession that you want to go into, you want to have to figure out how do you learn best. I learn differently than, my wife or for you, per se. We all learn in different ways. So I'm really looking for a way of what works for me. What's the best way to learn this? When I was in college, I went through the regular 4-year college. I learned business. I learned accounting. I don't remember a lot of it. It taught me some good skills and some, the soft skills. But I think a lot of the material in general is you have to be really comfortable and embrace almost the suck, as they say. I always tell my students, it's going to be hard. We just have to be okay that this is really hard. This is frustrating. When you're frustrated, when you're not feeling like you're learning, that's probably when you're learning the most. And that's the thing that I often have to teach myself. I may not be getting it to work, but eventually as I do and I struggle my way through it, I learn how it all works. There's a lot of different approaches that people take, but it's really just finding what works for you, I feel.
I find it's a great T-shirt, with the back slogan, "Embrace the Suck."
Mm-hmm.
I think this is something we should probably do a giveaway next time for whoever listening to this podcast. So let me talk to you a bit about your experience as an instructor, and what was that like? And and then maybe talk to me about, you spoke specifically about the goals of people that join in the Bootcamp Academy. Do you find that there is a certain attributes, again, for the people that join? And then, sometimes certain courses, it's almost like, how you make fries. You take a potato that has all the different shapes, you make them through like this, you put this through this machine, and then they all come out in uniform, shape and form. Is that how it is in these boot camps, where like you get people all shape and forms, and then in the end they come out with a uniform knowledge?
Hopefully. Honestly, the boot camp is hit or miss, I feel like, for people. Sometimes people sign up for something and they don't know what they're getting into, or they have this mindset of, if I just attend and I get the certificate, I'm going to get a job afterwards. And it doesn't really work that way. So I've seen students come through of all different ages, shapes, sizes, whatever. I've had people that are 18. I've had people that are 60. And everybody's in a different walk of life. They're in a different technical level coming in. And the biggest thing that I have to do is try to level set with everybody. You might be the top student, you might be the worst student, but the real takeaway here to be successful is there's going to be a lot of work ahead. There's going to be so many times where your code doesn't work instead of it working. You'll see me stand up here and code and it looks all smooth and easy, and you're like, oh, I got it. He did it fine. Makes sense. And then you pick up the keyboard and you're like, I don't know what to do. Everything's breaking, one little semicolon missing, and you're lost for hours. And so really it's just trying to teach the mindset of be patient with it. You can't do this stuff overnight. You got to take those short-term goals, work towards them. And then at the end, hopefully you do come out of the boot camp ready to graduate, to go on to a job. But, sometimes I don't always have full success. Not all my students graduate, but I try to teach them and give them at least the skills of, if you can't do it now, what do we do? Here's a game plan to get you there and to continue to work for it.
And what about there's so many different types, just like, cybersecurity is such a wide area of discipline. There's so many things you can do. Same as coding, right? You can be front end, back end, you can have like even, algorithm engineer, there're just so many different categories within the space. And like you are now developing a specialty or specialization in a domain of cybersecurity, which is a whole different discipline. You can decide, okay, I could have done this in finance, right? The software engineers are expertise in the finance sector. What are your thoughts? How do you wrap your head around it in, like, even inside the boot camp where you don't know what you don't know? A, from in terms of what you like or don't like, and B, like in terms of what's out there and what the possibilities are?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times, sometimes I never expected myself to be going into cybersecurity or going down these pathways. You really don't know sometimes what you're going to get into. I always thought I was going to just do full-on software development the rest of my life, but as your life changes or you get into a new job, you're presented different opportunities, and you say, let me see if that opportunity is worth pursuing. And if so, then you go down that pathway. And I've had a lot of students ask me in general, I've learned coding, but now you're talking about these other fields that I didn't even know existed. That sounds really difficult to get into as well. And I think really just the approach is you have skills that you can always bring over to a lot of these new topics. So if I'm going into cybersecurity, I have software development skills. I know how applications are made. I have other skills that might complement this field. Same thing with coding. I have people skills. So really trying to find the current skills you do have and how you can bring them into the new field, I think is helpful.
Yeah, and I think in your case specifically, you find kind of the perfect storm of combining, technical skills for development, combining curiosity around cybersecurity, the domain, and then the people skill associated with potentially leading a team of software developers and explaining a lot of the things that you do to upper management, which are not necessarily hands-on keyboard. What specifically attracted you, to cybersecurity? And do you remember the first days where you're trying to figure it all out? Like, as you mentioned, what is websites, site scripting and all that. Do you remember the first days and how does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I remember when I first started at Horizon 3, I want to say employee number 8 or something, one of the founding engineers. And we were building out this whole front end, the cybersecurity related product. And a lot of times, myself and my colleague, we didn't have any of that cybersecurity background. So we were confused, right? What are we building? We had to really rely on our cybersecurity experts and our hackers and everything. And they would give us some info along the way, but it really was just enough to build the product. The terms of SMB or cross-site scripting, SQL injection, whatever these are, I didn't know what those fully meant. And I remember how I got in, and I thought it was a pretty interesting story. Our red team was looking for more red teamers to join to automate attacks and to build out that side. And so they posted out the interview, like a technical interview. Here's the steps. Capture the flag on this box if you can. And I was like, I might take a look at it, especially since there was a bottle of whiskey to the first person to get it. I really just wanted the whiskey. And I started looking around. I started saying, okay, it's a Java app. It's an API. Wasn't really familiar with all the code, but I started just writing some Node.js script. I started poking at it, and eventually I brought back the flag. And so then I went over to one of the senior attack engineers, and I said, hey, is this what you were looking for? He's like, yeah, that's exactly it. Now point it at this server and let's see if you get the real flag, because that was just a fake flag. And I just ran my script. It brought back one. And, I won the bottle of whiskey, and they started to say, hey, you might have a knack for this. Tell me how you figured these things out. And I was like, I was just looking at the code, and I saw, there's a spot in the code where I could bypass an if statement. And they're like, yeah, you got it. So it was really encouraging to get to be around a lot of senior attack engineers who have their OSCPs. They have a lot of other certifications. I think I'm really blessed in that sense because I have so many experts that I can go to every day and talk to. And so I think really just seeing what they do, what they build, it was very interesting to me, and it made me just want to continue exploring it.
I like when I hear you speak. First of all, it's an amazing story, but I hear you speak. You said, well, I saw this in the code. It reminds me of the movie Beautiful Mind, where Russell Crowe, whatever, looks at, the actor is looking at, a bunch of math, equations, and they see something nobody else is see. Is that something like that? Is that do you have a skill set that you can just from experience, you can look at certain, code and figure out where the vulnerabilities are?
Yeah, sometimes. And that was the biggest, there was a lot of aha moments like that of, oh, I can just I'm just exploiting like a developer making a bad if statement. If I just need to get my code to travel down to that point. I can't read every language and different things, but I think really just seeing that and understanding this is hacking at its simplest form, that was a really interesting spot to kind of get started. And of course, it evolves into all the other topics you can go into cybersecurity, but a lot of it is like, okay, I'm kind of interested in this. I don't know everything about networking. I'm not a network engineer. I don't know everything about C or reverse engineering, but I do know applications. I know how that stack works. I can probably complement my skills with that. And so I just continue to pursue it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that your style of learning is a hands-on, is not so much, sipping out the beer on the couch and watching somebody else do that on YouTube, but you are in favor of doing like hands-on. So where do you start? If somebody is watching this and they know some coding, they went through maybe a boot camp and they want to get into the cybersecurity domain, where do you start? Because not a lot of times it's, an application is too large, right? Or, we don't necessarily want to just try to exploit large, banks or applications that are live. Where do you start?
Yeah. So for me, where I started was I did that interview and I'm like, okay, I want to do this more. How do you do this? And so I went to all the experts at work and they said, hack the box, go to hack the box, give it a try, see if you like it. And I went to the website. They have a really good setup for if you don't know anything, you can spin up a server. You can get a Parrot OS similar to Kali Linux right in the browser. They set up everything. It's free. It's legal. And you can hack, live targets. And what was great, because I was like, okay, there's a server here. I don't know what to do. They gave me walkthroughs. I started to read the walkthrough and just kind of follow the steps. And then once I started seeing the first exploits work, I got my first reverse shell. I got SQL injection and dumped a whole database. Any exploit it is, you really start to have it click in your mind. You really have to be hands on the keyboard practicing these things. Because again, I can watch someone do it on YouTube and it looks easy. But then right when you go to pick up the keyboard and go into the terminal, you can be lost easily. So Hack the Box was a really good spot for me. I started going through, they have a section called the starting point, and they're super easy. We're going to show you how to SSH into a box. We're going to show you how to do a very simple SQL injection. I continued to do those. And then after doing that a while, I wanted to try the live boxes that don't have walkthroughs. And so that was like my next step. So you might start a little more guided, and then you might try to go off on your own. I failed at that a lot, and go back to the guided. It's just really practice a lot over and over again, using the tech talks, using different things. But Hack the Box is a great starting point.
No, I feel like some of your neighbors, they may be watching this will say, I better put like a strong encryption on my Wi-Fi when they hear this conversation. Tell me this in software development, a lot of times as part of your quote unquote resume or CV, there's some traces of what you've done. So maybe GitHub or, some forms of code to showcase what you've done. What can you do to showcase certain expertise around hacking, around finding exploits?
Oh, man. Yeah, I think that's a good question because it's kind of hard to say I hacked this bank and here's the proof of it because that's very sensitive. I think a lot of times, at least what I've seen our team members do, the other engineers who are on the attack team, they have a Twitter. Anytime they're doing security research and they're the first ones to find a 0-day or to exploit something in Active Directory, they're posting their exploits, sharing it with the community. I think that's a good way of just kind of being a little more involved in the security community once you're comfortable, of course. Some of the other things, building tools. There's a lot of ways that you could probably automate your recon or different parts of the cybersecurity attack path. So how can I automate that? Maybe I can share that tool with others. Say, hey, here's a tool that I wrote that enumerates S3 buckets. share it, put it out there on GitHub. That's open source code that you've shared that does something, but you're not really showing your targets. So maybe building tools like that, being active on LinkedIn, just kind of posting or making a blog, anything that you can do. And those can also be good ways to enforce you to learn it as well. If I have a blog and I'm going to write an article every week about a topic, that's a good way to kind of get going down that path. And I think really just kind of working on boxes and gathering that expertise. And when you go to interviews and you talk to people, they'll already see it just by having a discussion with you that you are very understanding of this field as well.
And what's you think about some of those bounty programs, right? That you can potentially, hack for cash.
Yeah, exactly. That's also a great spot. I've done a little bit of just at least looking into them and poking at them. Bug bounties are great. You make money. You might find a pretty big vulnerability that pays you $5,000 or something too. And those are also great ways. I've seen a lot of people even talk about success of getting jobs at companies because they bug bounty for them. So yeah, that's a good option too.
And today, as Horizon 3, you are automating the way that that the company can find vulnerabilities, and essentially assisting people that don't have necessarily the skill set to find those vulnerabilities on a regular basis, and you're capturing that tacit collected knowledge on some of these exploits and automating that so you can reduce the cost associated with doing pen testing. So you essentially, if you think of kind of the bigger pictures, eventually maybe you'll start displacing, some of the same people that you trained as part of the bootcamp. What, and then becoming like, these pen testers and exploiters and so on. What's your take on that? That you're essentially kind of contribute to the goal of removing them from the equation?
Yeah. So, I think a lot of the things that we at least take the approach of is we're not looking to, of course, replace anybody. I think there's always going to be that human aspect of we need people that can read code, or if our tool was to find something, you need a human on the loop. You need someone to go and check it out, verify all that. We can point tools and automate stuff and run it. They don't always run seamless. They break a lot. They can be finicky, especially if you're scanning large networks or you're, working with a larger amount of targets. So there's still the need for someone to understand how to interpret all this data that gets displayed, how to take action on it, how to work with it. And a lot of times what we like to do is it's a complementary add-on to where you can use these things to augment your abilities to make you faster. If you were to tell me, go do a pen test or go scan and see what's vulnerable on 100,000 IPs, that's going to take me a really long time. But if I automate it and I have a tool that really just accelerates my workload, finds the high value targets out of those 100,000, then that's just helping me. That's saving me time, making my life easier. So I see it as a trade-off. Of course, there's going to be technology and things coming into the world that eliminate jobs or they change the way those jobs operate. But there's always the flip side of how do you work with that tool? How do you make sense of all the noise it generates and different things?
Absolutely. And let me ask you this. You are now a software engineer, senior software engineer, a company that creates this kind of the next generation of tools to essentially find vulnerabilities and decrease the risk associated with the attack surface of organizations, right? But the day-to-day operations, you're sitting down, you're basically problem solving, right? Like you're writing codes, solving problems, writing additional code, creating features and so on. How do you, as individual contributor in the company, keep on seeing the bigger picture of the company as a company? Because the company is now definitely more than 8 employees. And things change, and then you're now, I guess I'm assuming you have like deadlines in terms of the next release and so on. How do you make sure that you keep on motivating, and then from your specific quote unquote fairly narrow point of view of problem solving certain aspects of the code and generating more and more features, you still have kind of the view of the entire company and where you're going and keep on motivating yourself, being part of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a big challenge. So we started off as a small team, and when you're a small team, it's very easy. I'm the one person or the two people building the front end, but as you grow and you have over 100 employees, there's a lot more hands in the pot. There's a lot more people working towards the same objectives. I think the biggest things in general is learning to embrace the growth and leveraging everybody's skill sets. I have specific skills that I'm really good at, and that's where I'm going to put my focus. I have other engineers that are really good at different areas than me. And so I say, you focus on that, I'll focus on this, and we'll kind of divide and conquer this workload, because it really does grow. And as the company grows, or the companies that we help, usually they become larger. They have a lot more interesting problems. It's really always educating yourself about what is popular in the news, what is happening and trending in cybersecurity. Where do we see the next phase to move into? What would be the next proper exploit to kind of focus on? So there's a lot of different areas, but I think the big takeaway is leveraging everybody's skill sets. I have so many developers and engineers that I work with. They all have really good skills at particular things. And so it's really just giving people that ability to do their job and to be a specialist.
And then how do you keep track of, eventually whatever you write and the product itself needs to be sold to someone for the company to be successful. So there's somebody at the other end that needs it to for them to, and there's a particular reason why they signed the dotted line and paying for it. Mm-hmm. And how do you in particular work with sales, marketing, product management, and the executive management to make sure all the goals are aligned in terms of what you're going to be working on, in the next, several months?
Yeah, we have an excellent leadership team, which I'm really proud to be a part of, because I worked at other companies and I felt like the leadership wasn't there. So having all those leaders across the different business units, we stay pretty much in contact a lot. We're always talking about what are the problems sales sees when they talk with customers. These are the things that are top of mind for them. How can we work that into the product? Or customer success. These people are using the product and they're having these issues, or they want to look more into these particular areas for the product. How can we work that in? So we're always taking feedback. And I think that's the interesting thing. We do a lot of user research. We interview our users and we try to figure out, what do you want? What do you see this product doing? And then we take all that feedback and we try to figure out what is something that would be awesome that everybody wants. So there's really a lot of just being aware that you have to talk with these other business units. Engineering doesn't live in a silo and never talk to sales. We have to talk to sales. We got to know what they're selling, how they're messaging it, and we got to figure out how we can help them sell more, because at the end of the day, this is one big company and we all want to get bigger and to be more successful, and to see this grow, we have to kind of have that symbiotic relationship.
And sometimes I always ask the kind of almost laconic questions, for a CISO, like what keeps you up at night. And I've heard all kinds of, and people, they're getting sick and tired of that question. What is, in your particular case, like the worst case scenario, the worst nightmare? Is it like a line of code that blows the whole product up, or what is it? Because if you wake up at night sweating, what would that be the cause?
I wouldn't say it would be the line of code breaking everything, because I can go fix that line of code and push up a hot fix. But I think the biggest thing, and I've heard it a lot in general, is it sounds like ransomware is a really big problem. It's always scary to think, even not for Horizon 3, but in general, like the lives we live. What if the hospital I go to gets ransomware? Or what if anything of the services and the companies that I use, any type of ransomware where you wake up and all your data is gone, it's encrypted, and they want 50 grand, they want however much money to get it back. That seems pretty intimidating and scary, because I've seen it stop companies entirely. I've heard stories of we got ransomware and we can't recover from it. It just seems like a very dramatic, vulnerability. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I think about top of mind.
Yeah, but you're doing something about it, right? Horizon 3 is part of its goal is to allow companies to be more secure, and as part of that is being more less susceptible to ransomware. So is your wife now a coder as well?
She is. She's a software engineer. She's been doing it longer than me, so I consider her more senior than myself, and everything. Yeah.
So do you geek out as a couple? Like you come home and say, "Hey, you can't even, let me tell you about this subroutine thing that I wrote, and what was the end result?" Is that the case?
We do it occasionally. There's plenty of times where we also don't. We've built applications together, and it can be fun, but when you're married and working together, sometimes you don't always stay professional with each other, and sometimes we don't always work well together building every product. We've had fun, we've done it. There's been times where I do this a lot. I know I'm guilty of it. Every time I learn a new exploit or I learn a new thing about cybersecurity, I'm like, hey, let me tell you what I learned. And so it is really nice to actually get to talk that with her. A lot of people don't have significant others that they can speak technically with, but she gets what I'm doing. She knows what I'm doing. She supports it. And so that is really awesome. I think the biggest thing we learn in general is you do your code, I'll do mine. And we advise each other, but we don't normally get in the code together because you got too many cooks in the kitchen at that point.
So no, it's been really amazing conversation, and again, completely unscripted. All the questions will not be sent up front, but kind of run through live. What's next for Noah? Where are you going next in terms of your personal aspirations, in terms of the company, and so on?
Yeah, so as far as where I'm going next, I've been really focused on front-end engineering and JavaScript and all of that. I've kind of gotten to the point of I feel like I've become an expert at JavaScript or front-end. I really want to focus and go down more of this cybersecurity pathway. And so for me, I'm starting to go down the OSCP path. I've already started the course. I work on that material every day when I can find time. So my goal in the next year or so is to get the OSCP, continue learning hacking, to just continue to help others break into the industry. I have a lot of students that said, I want to get into cybersecurity. How do I do it? So just being a mentor, improving my skills, learning more, that's a real big focus for me. For Horizon 3 in general, I just want to see the product grow. We're doing some really awesome stuff that's coming out. I'm really excited. It's really improved from 2 years ago when we first started with nothing to now. We have a pretty big engineering team, and we're really tackling advanced and complex problems. So seeing all of that, it's just awesome. The kill chains are becoming way more advanced and going deeper. There's a lot that's coming up that I'm excited about.
Yeah, no, there's nothing better than being part of a success story and aligning your goals with the goals of the company. I think that's a match made in heaven. What's the easiest way for people to reach out to you for whatever reason, to know more about Horizon 3, mentorship, just, pick your brain about something, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I respond to just about every LinkedIn message I get. If people reach out and have cybersecurity questions, coding, whatever it is, I'm always there to mentor. So just look up Noah King on LinkedIn. You can also look up Horizon 3 on LinkedIn. Give us a follow there, and check us out.
Thank you so much for joining me today, and thanks all for joining. And stay safe online as well as offline. And I'll see you in the next episode.
Awesome. Thanks, David.
Thank you.